It's another circulation system in the body. So, as far as circulation is concerned, don't forget this. You only have, the vessels are called arteries, capillaries, and veins. Those are the only terms that apply to any vessel in the body. So, we go backtrack. Look at the flow of blood, right? Arteries, capillaries, veins, back to the heart. That's always the case, right? And you remember the hydrostatic pressure push out, the osmotic pressure suck it back in, right? But in reality, not all of them get sucked back in on its return trip back to the heart. That's what, and we cannot afford for that to happen. Remember, because you need all the fluid here because it's a closed circuit. That's the one that would generate the pressure. Does it make sense? The volume influences the pressure. Imagine if the volume was not able to return there, then in the next trip, the pressure is down. You cannot afford to have differences in pressure. So that's the importance of this lymphatic system. The difference between, it's a set of vessels also. It's another circulation system, except the cardiovascular is a closed circuit. And you look at this picture, the lymphatic system is an open circuit. It's a one-way trip. The job of the lymphatic is to pick up, return back to the circulation. So, just by talking, just by telling you that that's the job, can you guess, what do you think? What vessels do you think will you find in your lymphatic system? Are you going to find lymphatic capillaries? Yes, because they pick up entry, exit. They must have capillaries. Isn't that the only one that has pores to allow entry, exit? So this lymphatic capillaries. Will they have lymphatic veins? Yes, yes, because return.
But no arteries.
No arteries. Very good. They have no arteries. They pick up, return, pick up, return. And look at this picture. So don't forget that they have no arteries. They return. Does it make sense? Look at. They return the left, the slow pokes. They return it into a vein, not an artery. Why do you think is that? Why
the
do you
veins
think
go towards the heart? The arteries are away. The arteries are carrying everything away from it.
Yes.
Lower
pressure.
That's very good. That's the most important. That's the more important explanation. The pressure in the vein is low.
Okay.
So when you dump here, there will be no resistance. Whereas if you dump the fluid here, there will be pressure resisting it.
Or
right?
blood's gonna try and flow up through the lymph
Yes.
system.
Okay. And this is also the reason why when we do intravenous, we always inject into a vein. Pressure is low, so resistance is low. We never try to do it into the artery, right? Because it's gonna, how can you introduce any medication into an artery? They're gonna resist it. Pressure, high. So we always introduce medications into the vein. That's the same principle here. You introduce the slow pokes back into your vein. Okay? There's another news flash. Have you ever had a boo-boo? So look at, I want to remind you about terms. This is called blood in here. It's called blood, right? So what leaves? Is it the cell part or the plasma part? What is able to escape my capillaries?
Plasma.
The plasma part. So once the plasma part enters my tissues, I call it tissue fluid or interstitial fluid, right? So you know these different terms, right? You know blood, it's in here. When you say interstitial fluid or tissue fluid, it's the plasma that left my cardiovascular. It's now perfusing my tissues, okay? Once that fluid enters my lymphatic system, you now call it lymph. It's just different terms that mean the same thing. It's just trying to give you an idea of where these fluids are located. Okay, you now understand the term lymph. So I want to go back to this picture, this slide over here on the functions of the lymphatic system. See, it's very important for fluid balance because it returns the lost substances back to your bloodstream. Don't forget this one. It is also the site for fat absorption. So, I'm going to picture. That's why I had you draw your anatomy of the cardiovascular circulation. Now, if I tell you from the aorta going to my intestines, right, the mesenteric artery to the mesenteric capillaries, that's where I'm going to absorb my nutrients. I just digested, that's where I'm going to absorb my nutrients. No problem for glucose and proteins, very easy to jump in my blood. But can you imagine the fat to jump directly into the blood as plain fat? That's going to cause clots, right? So the fat is different. You absorb it first through your lymphatic system. And it's in the lymphatic system where it is converted into what you call a lipoprotein. I'm going to go back here, but I'm just going to jump to this slide number 5. You see, in your intestines, you have your capillaries, but along with capillaries, you also have lymphatic capillaries. So blood capillaries, the red and blue, you have your lymphatic capillaries. So the fat that I just ate is going to be absorbed in my lymphatics. So while it's in the lymphatics, this is where it unites or it gets joined with the protein. You're familiar with LDL, HDL, right? That's where it's formed first. Okay? And so we trace this. Isn't this going to go to my heart, right? The vein go to the heart. At least when it enters the heart, it's now in water-soluble form, right?
It gets absorbed
Right here.
in the lymph.
Yeah. So if this is your intestines, right? So this is where the fat gets absorbed, you see? And it gets converted to a water-soluble form called lipoprotein. So now when it enters my circulation, at least it's soluble in the water, which is the main component of my blood. You understand? Okay? And I want to look at this very important function of my lymphatic system, defense.
What is it?
Right
Defense.
here,
Oh,
defense. So, I want to ask you, you ever had a boo-boo, right? You had boo-boos, right? And most commonly, our infections or boo-boos happen under the skin or outside of the cardiovascular circulation. Does it make sense? Right? The harm always happens out here. And when you have a cut, I have a cut because I like to bite. Some people like to bite, right? And when it burns, you know that there's a cut. You know that there's bacteria already entered. Does it make sense? And one thing very important for you guys to know about these lymphatic capillaries, they are very leaky. They are even leakier than my regular blood capillaries. Their openings are wider. They have to be wide to allow the proteins back in here in case they were able to escape. You want to bring them back. So because they are leakier, look, if I have a boo-boo, isn't it very easy then for my boo-boo, for my germs right here? Very easy for them to jump in. Reminds me of my college days in the Philippines. When it rains, just shower, it floods. And there was a flood and they canceled class, so I wanted to go home. My home was from here maybe all the way to Bridgeport. So I walked because I wanted to go home. And I walked, the water was up to here. And it's a dirty country. You have cockroaches, you have trash, you have whatever you can think of. But I just said, I'm going to take a bath when I get home. I forgot. When I got home to take a bath, I forgot that I had a big boo-boo right here.
Oops.
So imagine all the germs that entered. thank goodness we have this lymphatic system. Can you picture that in your head? Whenever you had a boo-boo, of course there's a few seconds for you to run to whatever, right? Run to the soap and water. There's that few seconds where the bacteria already entered. It entered, it's going to jump in here. Very easy to jump in here. Because anatomically, this is wider, more leaky. Okay? So, that's why, that's the other important job of your lymphatic system. Have you heard of lymph nodes? There you go, you see? Look, maybe I had a cut right here and the bacteria entered, you see? And it will jump the lymphatic, join the lymphatic train. That's how they end up in your circulation. You had a boo-boo. The boo-boo was in your skin first. But why do you get treated? If after a while you end up with a fever if you don't treat it? Or what was that? Like the toxic shock syndrome, like the tampons and all that? It was, the boo-boo was outside. How did it end up in my circulation? It's this one that picks it up. But thankfully, do you know how many lymph nodes you have? God loves us so much. We have about 500 lymph nodes. And they say 75% of that is concentrated above the heart. Unbelievable. So the lymph nodes, right here, look at, there's a lot of lymph nodes. They're like your Brita filter. Do you, like I have a water filter, right? Don't we try to filter out whatever is harmful? That's the same thing here. So of the 3 types of cells, guess what type of cells are, they populate your lymph nodes? The red blood cells, the white blood cells,
White
and the
blood cells.
Yes. That's where the white, you have a lot of white blood cells. And look at it, you not only have one, you have a lot of them on its way right there to the heart. Does it make sense? So I have a boo-boo, the bacteria entered. It became part of my tissue fluid. You see, they became part of tissue fluid, and tissue fluid is what is being picked up by my lymphatics, isn't it? Right? So as it's being picked up, never fear, you have lymph nodes right here, you see? The lymph nodes, you don't only have one, they're hopefully they're filtering out anything that is foreign, which is referred to as antigen. An antigen, by the way, once it starts causing an illness or a disease, now you call it a pathogen. Do you understand? Can you picture in your head? Everybody? So if you have a cut, that whatever foreign toxic substance becomes part of what? Tissue fluid. And that's what your lymphatic system does, right? It picks up the tissue fluid to become lymph because you want to return that to your circulation. But a lot of times, not a lot of times, all the time, our tissue fluid is contaminated. That's why we need these lymph nodes. Now you understand the term lymphadenopathy, right? When you have swollen lymph nodes, that gives you an idea of infection going on and where in the body is the infection. That's why they feel for those lymph nodes. Does that mean you're healthy? Yes. I'm thinking that means if my lymph nodes are swollen, it means my white blood cells are working, right? They're trying to contain the infection.
So once the infection is dead, does the lymph nodes let it go so that it can
That's
be
a very
circled and
good-
gotten rid
yes.
of?
Don't you think, very good question. Whether it's bacteria, aren't they, the composition is the same. Any cell, bacterial cell made up of organic and inorganic compounds, right? So what do your white blood cells do? They just recycle, right? Put in the trash can, the lysosome, break them down to organic, inorganic compounds. When they release it, they're no longer the harmful parts. Very interesting.
So your lymph nodes filter out the foreign stuff that gets into your body, and if they're not working, then that foreign stuff becomes a pathogen, a disease.
Yes.
Because
Now,
your lymph nodes aren't functioning.
if they're not functioning, yes. Now you understand. That's how cancer is also able to spread, don't you think so? The cancer cells just jump in here, and that's the scary thing. This is why when you're like, when your white blood cells, yes, they're designed to target any kind of infection, but foreign cells are very sneaky. You see, they can mutate. We know that cells are very dynamic. Even cancer cells, they can mutate. This is why when they tell you to take, let's say, amoxicillin 3 times a day or every 8 hours for 7 days, you have to do it. Otherwise, your sneaky cells, the bacteria, they can mutate, and your white blood cells will be caught off guard. They don't realize now. They're able to mutate to look just like your own cells. They start spreading. And that's why does it make sense with breast cancer or any kind of cancer. That's how they stage, right? They do lymph node staging. That's how they figure out, because your lymph nodes are supposed to be your soldiers to guard, prevent anything from spreading. So if there's several lymph nodes, that's how they stage. It passed this one. Let me look at this one. That's how I say you're stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Do you understand? Everybody? Now do you understand why? Like my mother is a breast cancer survivor. You don't draw blood pressure on the area that has no lymph nodes, or they took out the lymph nodes, right? Because what's the job of your lymphatic pickup return? Can you imagine if you do blood pressure here? The pickup return is already compromised, and you squeeze, it's going to take a long time for pickup return. You understand my language? Do you understand? So that explains why you don't take blood pressure on the part of the body that where lymph nodes have been taken out. To take out lymph nodes means to compromise the lymphatic flow. So you squeeze the blood pressure cuff here, you're going to compromise. You're going to push out the fluid, but the lymphatic flow is compromised. She's going to end up with a swollen extremity. It will eventually drain, but she'll have so much pain. It's called lymphadenitis. So we don't want, it's called lymphedema. Now you understand lymphedema? Edema means swelling, right? Okay? Do you have any questions on this basic function of your lymph nodes? There's one more thing very important about your lymphatic capillaries. I want you to look at this anchoring filaments. Anchoring filaments. This anchoring filaments you don't find in your cardiovascular capillaries. You only find them in your lymphatic capillaries. It is very important for your lymphatic capillaries to always be open. But a lot of times they're always threatened to collapse because of the accumulation of fluid in your interstitial space. So the job of these anchoring filaments is to keep this from collapsing. If the pressure here is high, you want to keep them open and bring the fluid here. Okay? That's why you have, I remember asking that in the test. Function of this one, something to that effect, okay? When is this going to pull this open? This is going to pull this open or keep this open when the pressure here in the interstitial fluid is high. That's when this is threatened to collapse. Okay? So, I want you...
I'm sorry, can you say that again? The anchoring filament does what?
It pulls it. It keeps your lymphatic capillaries open, preventing them from collapsing.
Okay.
When the tissue pressure, the tissue fluid pressure is high. I want you to take a look at atypical lymph node right here. Look, this is the, and you have two general sets of vessels. This is the afferent vessels, meaning going into, so from my lymphatic capillaries, right, going into, and this is the efferent. This is the part that will eventually dump the lymph back to your vein, to the heart. Do you see a difference between the afferent and the efferent?
It's way more.
It's way more. The afferent, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there's only 2 efferent in this picture. Is there an advantage to that one? Do you think there's an advantage?
It really has control of what gets out.
That's very good. And don't you think there will be traffic jam, right? Look at, there's a lot going in, there's only 2 points of exit. This gives your white blood cells a chance to really take a look at the antigens or anything that's not yours, harmful chemicals. And hopefully they can prevent them from moving forward. And imagine this lymph node repeat before it finally gets dumped into your cardiovascular circulation. They're very effective. They say that all the time we're exposed to infection, but do you get sick all the time? No, because you have this. So your lymph nodes have a cortex and a medulla. You don't need to worry about it. There's too many terms for you guys to remember. I just want you to remember those different white blood cells, right? They're all here. Your macrophages, your neutrophils. Now we're going to talk about the T cells and the B cells also, but they're there. Now, there's a possibility, if I go back to this picture over here, it is very possible that despite your hundreds of lymph nodes, you still have some sneaky bacteria and they were able to enter your circulation. Never fear, right? You have another one, a plan B, called the spleen. You see, the spleen is also a lymphatic organ, but this time it filters your blood and not the heart. So the spleen is a lymphatic organ that filters blood and not the heart. There is another function to the spleen, right? The spleen is also the graveyard for your dead red blood cells. So that's why when you look at a typical spleen, it looks like this. You will see a red pulp. It's called red. It's where your red blood cells are. That's where the dead red blood cells, that's their grave, their cemetery. And then the nucleated cells is called the white pulp. That's your white blood cells. So the white pulp takes care of filtering your bacteria. The red pulp is for the dead. So what's the common feature between spleen and your lymph nodes is it filters the lymph nodes filter lymph. The spleen filters blood. They filter different things. Lymph and blood for here. Lymph for lymph nodes, blood for your spleen. Okay? Lymph filters, the lymph nodes filter your lymph and your spleen filters the blood. Their common feature is they're both lymphatic organs. Now, what we just studied are what is referred to as lymphatic organ. When they call it an organ because you can anatomically really differentiate it. But what you need to know is you really do not have to wait. The bacteria don't have that luxury where they can enjoy and have a nice dance in your tissues as long as they stay away from your lymph nodes. Because you also have what you call lymphatic tissue. So this is organ. There is what you call a lymphatic tissue. What is a tissue? What's the definition of a tissue? A collection of two or more cells make up a tissue. So even before you get, there's your lymph node. You see? There's the lymph node. Even before you get to the lymph node, look at this one. You already have a collection of white. As long as you have a collection of white blood cells, they form a lymphatic function because they form a defensive function. That's the function of your lymphatic system, right? Defense. So wherever you in the body you have a collection of white blood cells, there's just no anatomical boundary. You call that lymphatic tissue. And the lymphatic tissue varies, depends. If I have an infection here, so I know I have lots of lymphatic tissue here. Maybe here, no, because it's intact. You follow? You understand? This is example of your tonsils. Your appendix is an example of a lymphatic tissue. It's just a collection of white blood cells. Do you agree? It's right under epithelium. Epithelium is a covering, isn't it? So right under any epithelium, I am sure to find collections of white blood cells. What do you call those collections? Lymphatic tissue. You understand the difference between a tissue and a lymph node, which is an actual organ. See, before the bacteria will be encountered by lymph nodes, you already have your guards over here, wherever there's a an epithelium. Because epithelium is covering, lining. Do you understand? Okay, everybody? So, and that's why you have your tonsils, you have your Peyer's patches. These are called lymphatic or lymphoid tissue or lymphatic nodules, just a collection of white blood cells. But because they are part of they have a protective function, they're part of your lymphatic system. And that is the other part of the study of the lymphatic system. They function in defense, okay, which is immunity. You follow? We're done with the first part, which is the pick up, return, pick up, return. We're now going to look at the second important function of your lymphatic system, which is your defense. And as far as defense is concerned, you have the first line of defense, the second line of defense, and the third line of defense. This first and second line of defense, these two types of defense make up what you call non-specific. Non-specific, or they provide non-specific immunity or innate immunity. What this means, non-specific or innate, it means that the way they respond is the same, whether you're fighting a fungal infection, a virus, or bacteria. Like fever. Fever is fever. I can't tell you by your fever alone that you're fighting bacteria or virus. Fever is fever. They are non-specific. The way they defend you is the same. When the third line of defense, this is your most effective and most important type of defense. This gives you specific immunity or adaptive immunity. The way they respond is specific. It's tailored to the type of infection that you are fighting. Do you understand the difference between non-specific and specific? Okay? We're just going to study this part right here, the non-specific. Maybe we'll just do this one. Let's look at the first line of defense. What is first line? Just like a gift, right? A present. You have a wrapper. Before you get to the gift, you have to open up or destroy. Destroy, is that the word? Unwrap the wrapper. Your first line of defense is your skin and anything that's the intact skin. That's why they say an intact skin is very important. If you always have intact skin, you never have to worry about them invading, right? That's why we want to be careful when there's a cut with your band-aid right away, whatever. Okay? Intact skin. How about mucus? The membranes, the secretion. Remember the word acid mantle? You remember that? the skin is an acid. When we sweat, even the insensible sweat, don't they create an acidic pH, right? To prevent bacteria from possibly invading, right? How about your cough? The cough, sneezing, aren't you trying to get rid of the germs? That's why they say when you sneeze or you cough, you cover your mouth because you're getting rid of the germs that try to enter. So your epithelium is triggering a cough reflex or a sneezing reflex. You want to get rid of it. Secretion, tears, right? Your tears, your GI tract. How about the acidity, the acid pH of your stomach? So are you just like me? You drop the 3-second rule, right? It drops, pick it up, and eat again. When my daughter is not looking, I eat it again. So thankfully, I have the germs, not the germs. I have the acid in my stomach that helps to neutralize bacteria. But I'm sure you've done that when you were little, right? You pick up and eat, pick up and eat. And then urine. This, when we get to the renal system, you're gonna think twice when you hold your baby. Don't ever hold your baby. This is what's in there. It's dirt, right? Germs. You want to get rid of it. It may possibly contaminate it. Even the vaginal pH, right? That's why if the vaginal pH changes, what do females experience? Vaginal infection. So the first line of defense is very, very easy to understand, right? On Wednesday, we're going to start with the second and the third line of